Welcome to eJoy's training course for the story of the world. In our format slide here, you notice that we'll be reviewing books 1 to 4 and the lesson plans that were made for book 1 and book 2. Each of these books have 42 chapters, and they also have workbooks that go with them. But book 1 and book 2 have lesson plans that have been developed for our intermediate level students. They're 30-minute lessons, and they give auxiliary questions, more illustrations, and more exercises to help these students. But when you go into book 3 and book 4, you can use these lesson plans as a guide along with your workbooks to be able to develop additional information like your auxiliary questions or exercises. Now, one thing I want to point out is at the end of each book, there's a timeline of events. Excellent as an introduction to each book. Also to show your student where they are in the timeline when you go into each lesson. And also as a review at the end of the book. And there's a pronunciation guide. That's very important because there's many words from all over the world in many different languages that you may not know how to pronounce. And your student may not know how to pronounce either. So get familiar with where that is and how to flip back and forth quickly. If you're in your lesson on, say, PDF page 13, your pronunciation guide may be on PDF 69. And then if you've marked that down, you know where to go find it and get back and forth quickly between the two without using a lot of time. That being said, let's look at a lesson. This is lesson 5 of chapter 2 of book 1. Now, I can't stress enough, they need a warm-up. Each student needs a warm-up as they come into class because they've just had a busy day with who knows what all activities. And so ask them how they're doing. Give them a moment to get into the classroom, so to speak. And then you can review their homework with them and be able to give them something, some commendation for what they've done for their hard work. Now notice that they give you time periods, like 5 minutes here, 6 minutes to read, 2 minutes to go over vocabulary or write sentences. This will help you be able to see where you should be during a 30-minute lesson. And so you know, are you going at the right pace? Are you going too fast? Do you need to slow down? Do you need to speed up a little bit? Maybe review something a little quicker? Or you have time to bring in something additional, and I'll talk about that in a moment. So on the reading, we don't have to do it all at one time. We can say, okay, let's read this section first, and then we could talk about like from some of our fill in the blank or multiple choice key points we want them to know. We can talk about that during that. So when we do get to those key points, those questions, they'll be able to answer them. Something that I'd like to go over with the vocabulary is that there's going to be a lot of new vocabulary. This only brings out a few of the words that they may have trouble with. They may have trouble with many more. And so it's okay to encourage your students as you're reading, if you see a word you don't understand, underline it, circle it, and that way I can help you with that when we get done with our reading. And for our advanced students, if you assign them reading for the next class for their homework, have them do the same thing, underline, but instead of necessarily waiting to class to go over it, have them look it up in a dictionary, see if that helps them be able to understand the meaning of the word. And of course, you can still go over it with them maybe during the homework and review time, or as you're covering that point in the lesson. Okay. So as I brought out, there's some key points that we're going to find in the fill in the blank and the multiple choice. You can be aware of that and where they are in the paragraphs so that you make sure you highlight that as you're talking about those different sections. But if you got to listen to the introduction to the story of the world, I said that there would be a lot of maps that we get to learn about as well. Well, here is one of the maps, the Nile Delta. Write all over these. Get your writing tools out, circle Lower Egypt, have your student who's in Lower Egypt, have them write it out. Who's in Upper Egypt, write it out. What's so important about the Nile Delta? Make a list over here. What's off this direction? What's down here? Where are we in the world? We're only seeing a little square. Can they be able to put that together on a world map and know where they are? It's okay to write all over these and make it interactive for your student. It's what we would like to encourage. Here's something else I'd like to encourage. You see a picture here. You don't have to rely just on the pictures that are in the book. If you've been to Egypt and you've got pictures, if your student has been to Egypt and they got pictures, maybe we don't have time to bring their pictures in, but maybe they can tell us about one of the pictures that they took or one of the places that they visited. Also, if you haven't been there, they haven't been there, the internet's been there. Just one word of caution with that. Be careful that the pictures that you bring into the classroom are verified as legitimate pictures and are trustworthy sources. So, but you can bring in pictures that will help make the class more interactive. Now, this has a section of open-ended questions and a section where they can do writing. I'll talk about the open-ended questions a little bit more when I talk about the workbooks and how we use these together. But this writing section is an excellent place to give the student maybe an opportunity to write out one of these answers and be able to help them with their writing and their grammar. Also, there is a section here for putting things in order. When you're teaching history, sometimes it's hard to be able to see where things are in the timeline. That's where that timeline in the back of the book is beneficial, but also this timeline that you can bring into the class. At the end, you want to take time to review. Have a couple of minutes. Make sure you don't go over your time, but have a couple of minutes to be able to review what you went over and the key points, especially if there was something that the student was having trouble remembering. Also, this homework, notice this, it says or. You don't have to do both of it, one or the other. You don't want to give them too much homework. They already have a lot of homework, but you do want to make sure that they know what their homework is so that they can feel good when you review it in the next class and be successful where you can commend them. Okay, now I'd like to talk just a moment briefly about the lesson plans versus the workbooks. You can see here that these workbooks are for the whole chapter. So for your advanced students, they'll be going through a chapter at a time, most of the time. And so you'll go through the whole thing and you won't have to worry about this. But for your students that are intermediate with these lesson plans, they're only going through half of the chapter at a time or maybe a little less. And so they only pull the part from the workbook that the section that they're reviewing is over. But you can see how fill in the blank, multiple choice, multiple choice. But notice this difference. Open-ended questions, we don't have them in the workbook. We do have true and false, which we can get some of our open-ended questions from. But when you go to develop your own in book 3 and book 4, they can give you some ideas of where to come up with auxiliary questions, or you can go to the workbook and pull some of these questions for your students that are quickly going through the lesson plans. All right, one more worksheet here. The sequence ones are also not in the workbook. And so those are extra ideas which you can use with the timeline to help with your students, plus other exercises that you can think of from your own experiences in teaching. Okay, so as a review, remember to warm up. Give your student time to slip into the class. Also, make sure to cover all the key points and pronunciation. That's very important. And have fun with the drawing and the pictures to help the student be able to see these places visually in their minds, visualizing it, or in some of the extra pictures and charts that you bring in. And make sure at the end that they know what their homework is. Well, thank you for your time during this review of how to teach this course and some ideas that might be able to help you to be a little bit more successful as you develop your own lesson plans. Thank you once again.